Thanks, Jody. Welcome everyone to October 20th, General Finance, open agenda. We're just a few minutes late here. I know we're waiting to get quorum. So we'll go around for attendance roll call. We have a few online. If the individuals online want to go first, and we'll start with on the far right, which is Greg.
Greg Fraser.
Next. Amos.
Amos K. Jr. present. Online.
Thank you. And Dean. I see yours.
Dean Hill, present.
Okay. And then Chief, that you online there? I can hardly see you.
Yes, yeah. Sherry Lynn Hill.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Gary.
Carrie Bunbury.
Audrey Powers Bunbury.
Dale Baumberry. I guess I'll be chairing this meeting today.
Hazel Johnson.
Melba Thomas.
Elena Venevri.
And I think Cynthia's might be traveling to their meeting. I think there's a meeting in Akwesasne. I think that's where some of the individuals online will be as well, attending meetings there. So item number 2, media. I'm sure they're online listening. Okay, item number 3, changes, deletions. If not, then a motion to accept the agenda. Audrey, motion to accept. Moved by Audrey, seconded by Carrie to accept the agenda for October 20th. General. Okay, item number 4, the general finance minutes from October 6th, and I think that's in your Dropbox. You have to help me if I don't see them online. Okay, once you've had a chance to look at the October 6th minutes, if someone wants to move them. Moved by Hazel for the minute from October 6th. Second to that motion? Melba? All in favor? Any objections? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Okay, item number 5, we have a delegation. Laura Arnett. I'm not sure if I pronounced her last name right. But she'll be coming in a few minutes to speak to her issue. Morning, Tracy. Morning, Jen.
Morning. I say good morning.
Okay. Um,
No, good morning.
Thank you. You got enough there? Ladies, have a seat there. Then you can introduce yourselves and your associates, and then We'll leave it to you to do your presentation. Do you have anything online too? Because she might be able to put it online as well.
Did you want me to pull anything up for you?
If you wouldn't mind putting the slide deck up, I brought.
You just have to press the mic, the button on there, and everything. Right? Okay. Ohongatsili asewa kuego. Diane Hill Nyungyats, the new Survivor Secretariat Board Member.
Good morning, everyone.
You have two more in the back there?
Yes.
If you just want to introduce them, just
Okay.
say their name, that's fine.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Arndt. I am Secretariat Lead at the Survivor Secretariat. With us today, we have Ashley Montour, who is the Executive Liaison between the Board and the Secretariat. And we have Jesse Williams, who is our accountant and is the co-partner of the Albert Group, who manages our financial and employment services. So we're here today to talk to you about our conversations with Six Nations Health about funding. What we tried to do is give you a range of materials to review. You have, or were sent, all of our audits for the last 4 years. You also will have received a brief note that we prepared. It may not have been addressed to the right entities, but I've created a couple over the last few years for Chief and Council, so I used your template. In addition to that, you will see an overview note, which is what we submitted to Six Nations Health when they approached us about the funding. So with those materials in front of you, I'm going to try and be as concise and quick as I can because I know how busy agendas can be. We were approached by Six Nations Health in spring of 2025 about a $1 million surplus in funding from ISK. We were informed that Six Nations Health wanted to provide the funding to the Secretariat, and it was confirmed that the funding was to be given without an expectation of repayment. I can tell you that part of the reason we were approached is we had just earlier that spring met with Chief Hill to let her know that we were denied funding by SNGREC for the current fiscal year. We had not negotiated a new agreement with Ontario as of yet. And at the time, we were verging on insolvency. Part of the reason we did not is we did what organizations do. We contracted, we stopped all of our contracts with external partners.
Excuse me for a minute, Laura, just so you know, we're live and we have a number of counselors online, and so we're being broadcast live as
Okay.
well, so just so you know.
So, okay. So after our meeting with Chief Hill, we had asked for a letter of support from council around our application for funding. And then in the spring, we were approached by Six Nations Health. They asked us to provide an overview of how we would spend the money and how we would prioritize work moving forward. So in providing that overview, I have tried to use it as the foundation for the slide deck in front of you. So we proposed the idea of a survivors gathering. We canceled our gathering in June due to a lack of funding. And we do and continue to feel how important it is to bring survivors together in dialogue around the important issues of the work underway. Given that the Mohawk Institute took children from 60 First Nations, we have a very large community of survivors from across the country and into the United States. So we hosted a 3-day gathering in Thunder Bay. The reason we chose Thunder Bay was because it was, one, cost effective, So many of the First Nations communities the survivors were coming from were in the north, that it is a hub. So the cost of transportation for survivors is less, because if they're flying from flying communities, they only fly to Thunder Bay. They don't have to transfer to secondary flights into Toronto and then take shuttles from Toronto to Brantford. So we used our calculations for the last budget we had hosted, for the event we had hosted in Thunder Bay in 2024 as the basis for submitting a budget. So those were the actual costs that we proposed. And as you can see in front of you in the slide deck, we broke down everything from the cost of the hotel. The hotel included accommodation, meals. It also included all the snacks and everything for 150 people. Included air travel, speakers, fire keepers, an MC, and shuttle service to move people back and forth between the airport and the Best Western, because the Best Western is on the outskirts of Thunder Bay, and the costs of ensuring we had wellness and mental health supports in place. So our costs for that event were $425,000. We did have some small savings because we partnered with Anishinaabe Nation to coordinate travel for northern communities, because they do that work every day. They're the masters of northern coordination. And so what we did is we worked with them, and we worked with Anishinaabe Nation so that they could then coordinate and take on a similar function for survivors coming from their communities. So it helped us to keep the costs reined in. Our team is very small, and for us to have coordinated all that travel would have been, I think, a nervous breakdown for half of our team. With the like the decision we had received from Six Nations Health in the spring was, you can proceed, go ahead, submit us your first quarterly invoices, and we'll move from there. We proceeded with the planning and coordination of the event. As you know, it takes a couple of months to pull together this kind of an event, and to pull together speakers and such. So we moved immediately. And we did it with the most cost-effective approach we could, and that meant we reduced costs wherever we possibly could. Ashley, who's sitting behind me, became an event planner extraordinaire. She and Lee View, working at our office, took on the brunt of the planning and coordination activities, so that the event planner we used in the north didn't have as much contracted work as they did in the previous gathering. We absorbed in as much as we could. We also, when we talked to Six Nations Health, next slide, please, sorry, about our youth employment summer ground search, the one thing Six Nations Health was very focused on, and we were very pleased to see it, was summer jobs for young people. Summer jobs and employment are critical to wellness and well-being. And so we were able, with the funding approval of Six Nations Health, to implement our Young People Standing with Survivors ground search team again this year. I want to let you all know that the ground search model we have developed with the Secretariat is unlike anything else in the country. There is no model for ground search like the one we have developed. It is committed to hiring intergenerational survivors under the age of 30. We hope that they have post-secondary experience, but it is not a requirement. And we bring them in from the period of April through until they return to school in September. With Six Nations Health approving the program, we were a little late off the start, but we did get the program in play. This was the 4th year for the program. We had canceled it initially because we had no funding, and it meant there would have been no ground search this summer other than 2 of our ground search team, Jesse Squire and Eric Patterson. But because we had that approval, we put that in with our first invoice submitted. When we were told the funding had been approved by Six Nations and Six Nations Health, we were lucky, I have to be honest. One, I didn't have to lay off the 2 ground search people we had, but 2, the young people who have been working for us are so committed that when we called them, we got 5 out of the original 10 confirmed immediately. And then we were able to create spaces, so 2 of that student team became coordinators. So they became supervisors on it. So the beauty of the program is, one, it puts young people in touch with survivors, with human rights monitors, and a whole bunch of learning spaces where conversation and dialogue can happen. On top of that, they have capacity like I have not seen in any other project doing this work. The ground search team comprised of 6 Nations young people and 2, this year we had 2 young people from Akwesasne. They can lay grids, do surveying, and put it into a GIS program better than the OPP can. So we no longer use the OPP as part of our ground search team because our team is doing it as well as they are. They didn't get there by themselves. What we have done is we have partnered with at ESTA from the archaeology team at Western University. We have partnered with Scott Hamilton out of the archaeology program at Lakehead University. And to a lesser degree, we've just started a partnership with a researcher out of the University of Toronto. We do partnerships with individuals, not with universities. And that's one of the critical things in our work. The relationship of universities and knowledge when it comes to Indigenous people has not been one that's been based on trust and relationship. So what we've done is built individual contracts where we buy out their time from their university so they can come work for us. When they have access to our data, it's limited. And part of that agreement is they have provided training to Jesse and Eric and our ground search team to the point that our people can do the work as well as a first year master's level student. So I think the youth employment program isn't just about giving summer experience, it's about building capacity to bring this work in community and keep it there with process and models that ensure the knowledge, the data all stay within the hands of Six Nations and the Secretariat. So that program came in when we included the summer staff, the 2 program coordinators, and Secretariat staffing, $228,000. I included the salaries for the 2 ground search team because we were going to have to lay them off if I didn't secure funding. So this allowed us to keep the ground search team in play and allows those 2 ground search team within the Secretariat to be able to process data and do data analysis over the fall and winter months. Next slide. Commemoration and memorialization. We asked for $150,000 towards GEVC development of curriculum and books individual or in residential schools, working with survivors. Diane Hill, who sits with me today, has been part of those initial conversations with GEVC. We wanted to build curriculum that crosses, very simple concepts from early development of non-readers through to post-secondary, and create conversation materials and learning materials that would help children learn of the legacy. I would say my background is youth engagement. When you plant seeds in children, the return on those seeds as they grow and become critical thinkers is beyond our imagination. And the example I always use is how many of us use recycling bins? How many of us are proponents of food recycling? The reason those programs are so successful in Canada is because the seeds were planted with children in classrooms. And often kids will be reminding you the way you should do it. The same as non-smoking programs. I am a smoker. I hang my head as I say that. But one of the things that we know is when the non-smoking campaigns often started, it was your kids that were telling you it's not good for you, mommy. It's not, they were the ones that were breaking your cigarettes. They were hiding your cigarettes. So we see that children become very powerful models. And so our hope was in creating the materials, we could work with the survivors who really wanted to see the knowledge and the history of the residential schools taught, and that we move from invisibility to part of the conversation with young people, but in ways that children could manage. So we have created a documentary, Survivors Speak in schools and universities, and now we wanted to put materials and video work with that so that across all spectrums, when it comes to the Mohawk Institute, there is a legacy of knowledge that crosses from generation to generation in educational materials. We are working with educators like Diane. We were working with Dawn Hill. We are working with intergenerational survivors who are working in education spaces. So as well, around capacity building, we bring Indigenous data sovereignty and governance into the building of materials in the classroom. So Indigenous people create it, they can do the revisions, and they can determine how communities can use it. The thing I would add here is my background is I have been involved in curriculum development at the college level, and part of what we can do is through this is work with local boards to share this information so that they can use it. But if they don't use it in the manner that it's intended, we have the right to say the materials cannot be used beyond a 4 or 5 year cycle. That means we control, we own, and we determine the best way to communicate this information. And it allows it to be in a framework of our materials, and we want to create a space where people want to work with the Secretariat and survivors to get that real lived experience. Because I know from curriculum development, a lot of non-Indigenous teachers are very uncomfortable teaching this information because they feel that they'll be accused of appropriation of Indigenous knowledge, or they feel that they don't have the skill sets. Working with the Secretariat and survivors, it creates a relationship between the educator and survivors to provide this information in a way that is sensitive, and where the coaching and mentorship of how to present the content comes from survivors and the Secretariat directly. And that's why we thought it was important that we complete this project. It was paused. We started the work and we had to pause it because we ran out of funding. On the next slide, we talk about preserving the work of survivors. We've asked you for $75,000 to complete the work on the history of the work of the Survivor Secretariat. Many of the documentaries that have been completed or created around the Indian residential school experience really focus in on what happened to the children and the treatment of children. And what we really wanted to do is, through this documentary, talk about how survivors have said, this is what needs to happen. They've led the work and why it's been so driven by them. And so the conversations in the documentary talk about the legacy of the Indian residential school in Canada, why organizations like the Secretariat have been created to really uncover, document, and share the truth, and why this work is about self-determination. And the survivors are talking about, this is our history. This is what happened to us, and why is it that Canada continues to hold 27 million documents that we can't get access to, but it's about what was done to us. And so it shifts the narrative from victimhood to one of self-determination, where survivors are saying, I think of Roberta's classic line, they're waiting for us to die. Well, I'm telling you, I'm not going to die. I ain't going anywhere until this work is done. And I think the power of the documentary is to show the strength of survivors, the commitment they've made to remembering the truth to our communities and nations, because there are so many gaps. My mother, her sisters, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother all went to the mush hole. We never talked about it. I'm in my 60s, and the first time we really talked about it in our family was when the checks rolled in. My mom got the phone call, I got the call, or she got the mail, I got the call, I came to her house, and all she kept saying to me was, the dates are wrong. The dates are wrong. And that's when I first heard my mother talk about the experience of residential school system. What this documentary does is it takes on some of the whys around why are we having these conversations now? And for many survivors, it's because they're still managing the shame. They don't want to put, as Diane talks about it, the scars and the horror I carry in my memories, I don't want those going into other people because you can't stop thinking about it once you know. And so the documentary is really aimed at talking about why we have to do it. But part of the reason we need to do it is this is part of our history, and we have to remember it to our nations and our communities so that our children can understand why the words legacy and intergenerational trauma still matter. Legacies of residential schools. And we talk about all of that because near the end, so many of the children who were taken to the mush hole, like Roberta and her sisters, ended up in child welfare. And we know, those of us who work in this area know that the residential school system didn't die. It passed into the child welfare system, then it's transferred into now the northern school systems, the justice system. And so in doing this, the survivors' hope is that in understanding the pain that they have survived, that future generations will see the strength that they continue to hold around saying, this is our history, we have to live with it, we have to face it, and we need to learn from it, but we'll decide how. And it gives the survivors a very strong anchor around self-determining, around how they want the legacy of their work portrayed. And so the documentary has been going on for a year and a half. We are doing the last bit of filming tomorrow at the offices. And then our hope is that that will become part of the educational materials and the legacy of the survivors. And then the next slide talks about preserving our archival data. I say this word partly in humor because this topic is such a tense one. I slag the college and university ivory tower system, but I'm also a product of that system. But what I do know is the reason I give them a difficult time is I, in the course of my learning, have learned how researchers come in, they take bits of information, they twist it out of context, and then we end up with what's called a deficit model of research, which portrays us as weak victims, often not able to manage the realities of our own lived experiences. And what we've been proving through our work is that's not true. We don't work from a victim's deficit model. We work from self-determination model. And so everything I have done with the board over the last 4 years is to bring the data home. And so I sat with council about 2 years ago, and I will say, thankfully, you didn't take us up on the $1 million because it's the only thing that kept us alive when Canada cut its funding. But we approached council a year ago saying we would like to invest $1 million in data sovereignty and data governance work so that we can ensure that when the funding is cut for the Survivor Secretariat, the arms of the community will wrap itself around the memories of the children. When we talk about our archival data, I don't talk it that way. I talk it as a memory project. What we know so far is 6,200 children. We know that number of children who went into the mush hole. We know that there were more children, but we currently don't have the money to continue the work that we're doing. But we have brought home the information associated with 6,200 children. And everything we've been doing in our archiving project has been to protect the memory and the legacy of every child by protecting that data. Where we could not protect it when they were alive, we can protect it now by limiting the ability of researchers to come in and say, oh, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z with residential schools and we're going to access the data. What we have worked very hard to do is create a database system that's only available to survivors and family members so that when your family is ready to do the work, and my family, my mother is still living, so there will be no work in my family because my mother's made it clear, I don't want you to know. When I'm dead, that's fine, but not while I'm alive. So I've invested 4 years in creating a foundation and a premise to create a database that I can't access. So there's what's called a firewall around my family's information until my mother It's a horrible thing to say until my mother passes away. But what we have done is we're protecting the children. And so we've created a database right now that's only inward facing so that Micah Patterson, another brilliant Six Nations community member, a young person, she's our master archivist. She's our head of research. She holds and protects all the information. Anytime a survivor wants information, we have a system by which they go in, they have a conversation with Micah, we verify that they have a family relationship to that person, we check to see if that person's still alive, we do everything we can so that before we give the information about that child, we know that this person is rightfully bringing home somebody. We see the Memory Project as a remembering project so that every family can bring that child home. They can grieve the child who died. They can get access to, eventually, to the records we hold. And we're now currently working to create an outward-facing database so that survivors can access it. But for those of you who remember our presentation, we have a problem. We have an agreement between Six Nations Council, the University of Manitoba, and the Survivor Secretariat to access records at the NCTR. We are the only entity in the country that can copy files, but I cannot share files with families. Those are the copies belong to the University of Manitoba. I do not say the NCTR because if you look at the fine print, the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is the University of Manitoba. The University of Manitoba houses and holds the data. And for us, it's hugely problematic because they are not Indigenous. They do not have an easy process by which to access the data. And for us, in recent times, we've been more efficient than they have. So in the last 4 years, we have collected 37,000 documents across the country. That's not one page. 37 unique pages. It could be volumes. We traveled to England. We went to Lambert libraries. We went to the National Archives. And that would be Roberta, myself, No History, and our investigator. And we spent 5 days. And I guess that's where my university education matters because for me, that was very exciting. Spending 10 hours a day in the archives. We scanned everything. And they didn't realize what they held. But we scanned everything and we brought it home. And so in asking you for money for our archival data, it's money to invest in the Memory Project. We want to be able, and we only asked for 80,000 because what we wanted to do is we wanted to complete the work we had started because we didn't want to leave things dangling, the pieces that were incomplete. So the 80,000 was for us to close off the agreements that we had with No History, bring the last of the archival data into our hands, and to complete some data development activities we were doing on the research side. And then I asked you for $30,000, and that was to support the financial costs associated with administering, funding, and reporting on our archival work. So some of that funding and finance services was as we pay invoices and pay salaries, we are doing that through the Albert Group, and everything, as we all know, has to be associated with a bill. So that's the brunt of the million that we asked, that we planned for when we first had the conversations with Six Nations Health. On the next slide, I want to give you some context. So the Survivor Secretariat has received no funding from Canada through SNGREC in the 2024-2025 year. So currently we have no funding again this year. We still do not have a funding agreement with Ontario. I do want to let you know we did request $3 million from Canada. We have reworked our work plan 3 times for Canada. It's been really difficult. You know, some of the things we've been told is We have a website because there's always concerns that we don't communicate enough around what we do. The website provides everything. It has all of our audits on it. Every time we're part of an event, every time we do a community outreach, it's all on the website. It's information about our board. We do everything we possibly can to ensure people are aware of events. We advertise upcoming gatherings that we're hosting, our AGMs. We purposefully host our AGMs here in community during the day so that people can attend. But we grapple. And part of the dilemma when I raise that with you is in our conversations with Canada, and they've been really difficult. It's been, you finish the meetings and you have to go out and get fresh air because they say things to us like, you cannot do communications and awareness with non-Indigenous entities. You cannot use your website to reach beyond your survivor community. You cannot host survivor gatherings anymore because, basically because we can't. We can no longer do invasive archaeology. Well, we've never done invasive archaeology. And so sometimes I get a little sass, and so I say, okay, oh, and I'm not allowed to partner with non-Indigenous entities. So I get a little sassy and I say, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a caveat on every single page of our website saying Canada does not want non-Indigenous people reading the truth about what happened in Indian residential schools, so they are not funding this page. And then I said to them, as far as us not working with non-Indigenous partners, can I ask who on the SNGREC team is Indigenous? Because if the truth is I can't engage, then what is SNGREC doing coming to the table to partner with us? You can't speak out of both sides. And the restrictions being placed on us developing educational materials, can't do it anymore. They're cutting the funding for it. And I said, where's reconciliation in this conversation? Reconciliation is all of Canada, not locking me into that the only people I can talk to are survivors, and the only people survivors can talk to are people in their communities. And I said, it sounds very reminiscent of the Indian agent, determining what we can do, who we can do, and who we can do it with. Well, it kind of went over okay until Canada decided to assign its lead litigator for SNGREC to our file. And so they started asking us to rewrite the work plan. We think we were denied funding last year because we raised the issues around standing with survivors when they tried to cut the funding. Canada cut the funding for all communities to $500,000. We mobilized with every community in the country the idea of standing with survivors, and guess who the only organization was that didn't get funded? It was us. Canada tried to say that there were a problem with our expenditures, that we had used funding for non-approved things. We went item by item. Albert Group is here today to show you if needed. We went item by item. Everything we spent money on was an approved item under our first 3-year agreement. Then their lead auditor got involved and said, no, I took a look at it. There was nothing wrong with your expenditures. I've reviewed all your audits. You were fine. So we said, okay, can we have the money for last year? We were denied. Sorry, that year is now closed. We cannot give you funding for last year, but we'll work with you for this year's funding. We have now been in conversation with them for 3 months, no funding, and we sent them an email last week asking when a decision might be coming, and all they would say to us, it's under review. And that's what they said to us all of last year, and on January 23rd of last year, I got a letter at midnight letting me know we were getting $0. So we're quite anxious about the funding from Canada. Ontario has already let us know they're going to approve us for the same level of funding as last year, which was $950,000. They also gave us, and it's hard for me, given the history and the way many people perceive the current government in Ontario, Ontario's been very good to the Secretariat. The average funding provided to investigation teams in Ontario is 750,000. They give us 950,000. And last year, when they heard that we hadn't got funding from Canada, Ontario contacted us and gave us another 950 in year to keep us afloat. So they've been really good, but that money is long past exhausted. So this year, as we got the news from you through Six Nations Health that there was funding, we were using Heritage Canada funding and Law Foundation grants. Next slide. Sorry, I jumped ahead. I walked through the slide deck so many times in my head, I know it by memory. We had received funding from Heritage Canada for a museums project we're doing. That will, it's already been accepted in museums across the country, including the ROM, the Human Rights Museum, to talk about very specifically, the legacy of the Indian residential school system through the eyes of survivors of the Mohawk Institute. So they gave us $375,000 this year, and the Law Foundation of Ontario gave us $500,000 associated with work we're doing. Because we anticipated our funding being cut by Canada, what we wanted to do is we are purchasing major case file software, which is a police investigation software that we want to use within our database so that we can start linking information within the 37,000 that we already have collected, and then files that we'll collect on our own, to start linking more information to find the children who died or the children who disappeared. So the Law Foundation submission was to purchase the software and begin linking how you can cross-reference records, documents, and archival information with investigative software to find the children. The problem is we're bringing everything in-house. We're not asking somebody else to do the work for us. We're purchasing the software, bringing it into the Survivor Secretariat. So even if the funding were to be cut and we don't have anywhere to go, all the tools we own. So that if it becomes part of Six Nations agenda, the survivors will always continue to exist. It will be how it's resourced and from a staffing perspective. But the Law Foundation funding is to allow us to have the capacity to be self-determining on how we will continue to do investigations, but have an efficiency of software that we have been missing in policing. So we also had that multi-jurisdictional police task force. In the time of their work, they identified 8 additional deaths to what we identified from the initial NCTR numbers. In our work, we are now at 105. We have identified more deaths than the multi-jurisdictional police task force, than the OPP, Brantford Police, like that, they're part of the task force combined, and more deaths than the NCTR identified. The NCTR announced in early September that they were going to be releasing names of children who died at the Mohawk Institute. We contacted them immediately and said, we called foul, for lack of a word. You don't release these names on September 30th, the day of National Reconciliation, without communities being able to have the time to have wellness supports and a resource response set up, so that if we're contacted, we know what the names are of the children, where they're from, so that we can be prepared. For 3 weeks, we tried to get that information, couldn't. It wasn't until I signed a letter on behalf of the board that we got the information. We got the information on the Friday at 5 o'clock when the National Day was on Tuesday. So we received the information, we reviewed it. There wasn't one name on that list we hadn't already identified. It took us 4 years to get that information, and we had already uncovered it. So part of the reason the Heritage Canada and the Law Foundation work is so important is that both of them create spaces for us to own as a community the manner in which we will talk about this work and the people involved in this work. But more importantly, from the sake of money, between the two of them is $875,000. That's how we have managed to stay afloat. We have realigned, so that we can do the work. I am now down to less than $120,000 in the bank. And I have all the bills coming in from the gathering that we hosted in Thunder Bay. I have paid the bills associated with the summer program, but I don't have payroll. I have very limited ability to do anything else. We're in a bit of a holding pattern. And it's only council members that are in this meeting, right?
Saying
Okay,
earlier,
yeah, it's
we
just
are
council.
online.
Yeah, and it's just council members though, or
Council
everybody?
members here, there's council members online, but people are watching this online from
Yeah.
any and everywhere, so.
Okay, so the funding reality for us is we have been living in this space of great financial anxiety for now a year, over a year. We're heading into a year and a half. It is very frustrating for survivors because I'm often in a space of talking to them, having to give them the bad news from Canada, bad news from Ontario, and then bad news that we don't have the funding from Six Nations Health. And I often don't have answers for the questions. It's that we've been asked for more information, we're doing what we can. And I have to say, sometimes I wonder if they think I even know what I'm talking about, because it seems like I keep coming back to the table saying, I don't completely understand. And it's not that I don't know my job, I know my job. But the hard part for us is we had a gift horse that came to us that saved us. And then we understood that everything was done. And then after the fact, came to understand that was one level of approval that hadn't happened yet. And so that's what I have to take back. And then the question is, and my board are wonderful, but the question is, when will you get approval? And so this meeting is our hope that this will be the point that you have enough information that we can get approval. Otherwise, I'll have to be giving notices to people, because once I pay out the bills associated with the gathering, I won't have any money left. And so we've asked them for 30 days so that we can have this meeting and move forward. But we made all those decisions on the premise that we had been approved and all we had to do was submit invoices. It wasn't that I don't write checks on, or I won't now, I won't write checks on promises. But we anticipated when we submitted the invoice that within 10 days we would receive payments. And it's been 3 months, 4 months, and now we're at 5 months. But that's it. That's my presentation.
Yeah, we do have some questions here.
Yep.
I know Audrey had a question. So go ahead, Audrey, ask your question, and anybody else wants to ask questions.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. The first one is, a clarification of the name. You say that Six Nations Health Funding gave you money. Here we have a well-being committee, which looks after health. So who is this health, Six Nations Health?
So I was going to jump. We were approached by Crystal,
Crystal who?
Crystal Burning, in April, May. And our understanding is it was unspent funding associated with ISK, that ISK gave permission to realign so that it could be provided to the Survivor Secretariat for its work.
Go ahead, Audrey, you got more questions?
Yeah, are you doing any work with our Six Nations Data Department? Because we have one here too.
So we were working very closely. When we first approached Six Nations Council in 2024, we started having meetings with Zach Miller and his team. That was when we came with $1 million to try and take on Indigenous data sovereignty and data governance and look at strengthening through some expert panels. We ended up needing the money to operate. We were meeting. Things got very busy with Six Nations Council, and Zach and his team have not been able to follow through on the meetings, but we had regular meetings scheduled to talk about this. Our entire team is trained in OCAP. It was a requirement of every employee. So we understand when it comes to Indigenous data sovereignty and governance, it starts at the nation. And that's what our hope was, is to work with Six Nations so that we could better anchor the Secretariat's process in Six Nations. But those meetings have not been proceeding, I think, just due to pure workload issues, not because they don't want to meet with us, but I think Zach and his team were being pulled, and he had some portfolio changes as well.
Okay, Tracy, is that something that you can follow up on? Yeah, well, for that. And you talk about this program that you have about having families know about their history of people who are in, were in the mush hole, for lack of a better word. So if they want to get a hold of you, who do they call?
They contact our
Let
office.
me-
Oh, sorry.
Who do they contact? How do they get in touch with you? And what is it that they should be asking for? Are you trying to expand on what that family knows and more of the siblings who may want to be getting involved? Because there are a lot of siblings, a lot of people out there who don't want to get involved. They don't want to be in the limelight, but they do want to have
Information.
the information or expand on the information for their future generations.
So we're in a pickle because the agreement with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is we cannot reach out to families. We can only respond to inquiries that come to us. So we talk, you'll notice if you go on our website, we don't talk about you should call us. What we talk about is this is the work we're doing and we've identified this information. We hope it will pique people's interest and they'll want to call us to learn more. But our agreement with the NCTR is we're not allowed to provide the information. So even if you were to call and say, my family, or I attended the mush hole and I'd like access to my records. So Micah on our team is the person who would talk to you. We would have an initial conversation. When did you attend? What community are you associated with? Are you a registered band member? Like, we try to get as much information as we can to verify legitimacy of who you are. And once we have that information, Micah does her magic. She'll look through our records and files. So then, after you've contacted us, we say we found some information. I cannot provide you copies because of the restrictions on access that we have with the NCTR. But if you'd like to come and meet with us, we will sit and we will walk you through, and you can look on the screen what we have, and we will walk you through the records and files. If any of the information we have is also available by open source, or like anyone in the public can find it, we can't give it to you, but I can tell you where you can go to get it. And Micah will tell you where you can go to get it. Part of the work of Micah doing the follow-up is when she has a conversation, if we're talking and you get very emotional, very angry, we link in our wellness team immediately. And so if you're coming in, we'll let you know that a member of our wellness team is there. We will give you the contact information of our 2 wellness people, or to the 3 national resources we use, Hope for Wellness, the Survivors Crisis Line, and one other line. So you are self-determining in whether you want wellness support, both traditional or mainstream or something in the middle. So we work very hard to do those things, but we have a lot of limitations placed on us around how much information we can give you. We haven't pursued it, and the reason we haven't is because there's 27 more million records we want our hands on. And if we were to make this a political or legal argument right now, our fear is we won't get access to those records. And so what we do is we work through the mechanisms, and we've been bombarding Canada with ATIP requests. And because of the 27 million, it was 24 million 2 years ago, now it's 27 million. Now what our plan is to do is we're going to be working to just send hundreds of ATIP requests to Canada, because when they were doing the work with the Inuit peoples on a separate investigation. How they got the records to Canada was they bombarded them with 500 ATIP requests. It so frustrated Canada. Canada gave up and gave them access to the records because there's a formal process with ATIP. If you don't respond within X amount of time, they have to give you an answer. And then if we don't like the answer, we take it to the Human Rights Tribunal and the Privacy Commissioner, and they have to end up giving it to us. The only problem is when they do give it to us, it's so redacted. They black out everything, and it doesn't help. So we are doing the best we can to let survivors know, but we have to do it within the restrictions that are placed on us. And if we know where they can get their hands on copies, we do. And so every time Micah gets a request, she looks to see if it's available somewhere else on a database. So what she does is she maps the links into an email so people can, if they need to, follow through on getting access to their own records and documents.
Okay, one more, Audrey, go ahead.
Sorry. It seems really unfair to our members here on Six Nations that they don't have any access to their documents or their family's documents. Is there any other way around this? Like you say, you don't want to get involved with legal, but have you checked with legal to see if there is any way of doing this, or is there another way of starting this for Six Nations to break away from them and to do it on your own type of thing, or our own, so that those records, they belong to people out here and they should have access to them, in my opinion, you know?
Those are some of this is some of the hardest work I've done in my life. And it's because every avenue I turn to, a door closes, I want to pursue legal. We have looked into a class action, whether there would be grounds for us to pursue a class action on this. We've talked to 3 different lawyers. There isn't right now. And Canada has put so many restrictions on legal. Like even when we do ATIP requests, I have to bury it in my contract with one of our partners because they don't fund me for legal. So we're trying to do the least intrusive strategies we can as a secretariat. We're 7 people. 8 of us, including me. And for us to take on the legal work would cost me more than my entire staffing salary for a year. And all that would do is get us potentially a date in the court, not necessarily an answer. Part of our hope is in developing, one of the things I've learned in this work is if you want to do something, you have to prove we can do it better than they can do it. And so part of the reason our database is what it is because we've built a database that's better than anybody's in Canada. We are using the EU standards because of the most rigorous, strenuous. They beat both Canada and the US standards around data security. We are using OCAP as a basis for our policies and procedures. We built a database through an Indigenous tech company. All of this that we've done is to prove to Canada we can meet their standards and exceed them around housing our data, because the argument is going to be it's safe at the NCTR. And what we're going to say is it's safer where it belongs, in the hands of its community. And the problem is, if today you were to go, or a family member were to go to NCTR to look for your information, it will be months before you get an answer. If that family member contacts the Secretariat, and I'm saying that now while our volume is low, Micah can probably get back to people within a week. And we can have wellness supports for them. And we have had people from Six Nations contact us, but we've also had other people from Six Nations saying, I don't want my information shared. So we're trying to find the middle ground, but we are trying to get ready for a battle that we know is coming and be able to give Six Nations a solid database, a solid protocol. We really want to be able to work with you around data governance and data sovereignty, so that all of those things are in place, that if it does become a legal argument, we did your groundwork. Because we don't forget that we are in this agreement because Six Nations brought us in.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Is there any more questions? Hazel?
The whole topic is very mind-boggling. It's almost like a pattern has been set by the government in their relation to Native people. Like the very fact that you can't get no records. It's the same with that Diocese of Huron for the churches. Like, it's almost like they dangle this carrot in front of you, and then like for the secretariat, for example, no, we're pulling back the money, when at the time, everything was the Truth and Reconciliation. It was like they're for you, and then all of a sudden, they yank all the funding, the support, deny you access to records. It's a pattern over and over, and I see it being in council on every topic that we address, where they're our biggest deterrent, I guess, where you just seem like you can't really make progress. But I think the day is coming, and I'm sure it's with our land claims. And I think at some point in time, there needs to be a class action against that government for this treatment that is enduring now. Where we got sort of so close, and then here again, it's ripped away from you. It's a very, very sad story for the survivors, for the community, because we all have people, like you said, your mom, right? She don't tell you anything. The pain that they must be carrying. And none of us want to see our loved ones walking around in that pain. But you just keep it hidden deep. That's such a sad way to live.
So Laura, I don't know if you're done there, Hazel.
I'm done.
So just to summarize, I guess, because I know we're getting behind, we got other people wanting to come in here. So right now, you're here looking at the $1 million that you say was offered by Health Services. So I know, I don't recall it coming to council, because I know a department can't authorize that. It would have to come to council, and I don't remember. So that's probably a little bit of checking we got to do on in relation to that. And we can ask Tracy and Jennifer to follow up on that and see what was done, or if a motion was brought forward to us in relation to the additional dollars. One more question for Elena, then we have to move on.
Yeah, I don't want anybody here to think that we're not supportive of the work that's going on. I think everybody just needs to understand that we're absolutely trying to be accountable to who we need to be accountable to as well. So when there's little inaccuracies, you have to check that out. So I was wondering why there's a briefing note that says 999,300 and whatever it is. And then there's the $10,000 discrepancy. So what is that?
That was because if you take a look and add up all the budget, everything we accounted for, it's just under $1 million. So,
No. So I added up the numbers that you provided in your, so that's 989.
oh, I can fix it then if it's a small account adding error.
And then the briefing note is 9,999. So there's exactly $10,000
Okay.
difference.
I can go back in and take a look at the numbers. That may just been as we were doing the cross-referencing and the different documents. And then the only thing I didn't cover was our last slide. We have also applied for 2 grants with the Catholic Diocese and the Anglican Diocese around access to church files, just to address your point, Hazel. We have been pretty lucky with the Anglican Church. We were given full access to the Palace Archives. That's why we went to England. We were given a small grant from the Toronto Blue Jays to fund that trip. But we saw documents there that I don't understand why they're not here. And that's the original Three Kings documents. It's held by Lambeth Library. And we couldn't even take pictures of it. But there's some very interesting, we scanned everything else, but just not those documents because they felt they were too fragile. But we've learned a lot in the course of the work. So we're done. We're
Okay.
desperate. I'm leaving you just a little bit about our ground search, the issues around funding. We have lost 2 valued members of our board community, Bud White-Eye and John Elliott this year. This is a book that John wrote Bud wrote, and I'm leaving copies for the board, for the council, so that you may all just get a little bit more insight into what the Survivor Secretariat work is anchored in.
Okay, one last comment, Deb?
Hi, Laura. I'm Deborah Jonathan. We've been communicating by email. Dale, I just wanted to answer your question. So we did try to bring the briefing note for a resolution last month, and then it was stopped, and the request was to have Laura and the Secretariat come in. So there was one to put this through. And Crystal Burning did confirm that the funder approved that allocation.
Okay. So would we have that existing resolution? Because I do remember when it did come, there was some questions in relation to the budget, so that was going back out, so I don't know, I guess those were clarified. So Jen, would we have that existing resolution that was brought forward last time that got kind of deferred, I guess?
Yes, the briefing notes in the October 6th. Yeah, exactly. It was in the in-camera session, but that's where the briefing note is in your Dropbox under October 6th for the in-camera general finance.
Okay, so we can deal with it in camera then. Okay. So we'll look at it when we get to in camera. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate all your hard work. I know it's a lot of work. Thank you. Okay, in regards to item number 5, then just a motion to accept their presentation as information, and then any follow-up we'll do with the in-camera based on the previous minutes. Moved by Dean, second by Audrey, all in favor? Okay, motion's carried. Item number 6, from Built Environment.
All right, so Dale went just to the bathroom really quick, so I'll chair for the time being. And right now, we're gonna be on number 6. Morning, Andrew. Okay, so we'll continue on. We'll look at number 6, recommendation from Built Environment, Climate Adaptation, Lands and Membership Committee. Whereas Six Nation Housing must continue to maintain and upgrade all existing rental stock, including improvements to reduce energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. And whereas Associated Engineering has offered their expertise in design, project management, proposal writing, and fundraising. And whereas Natural Resources Canada has withdrawn their letter of commitment, but would renew this letter of commitment, providing Six Nations of the Grand River provides a letter of support for Phase 2 of the GNPP project. Therefore, be it resolved that Six Nations of the Grand River 59th Elected Council approve the following recommendation from the Built Environment, Lands and Membership Committee, that the letter attached of, that the attached letter of support for the Phase 2 of the Greener Neighborhood Pilot Project Program be approved. Any questions from council from the committee, just to elaborate? And if so, Andrew, want to just elaborate on anything you may want to add on? I don't think so. No questions at the moment. I'll go ahead and let Dale take it from here.
Okay, I don't know if there's any questions, because I know this was originally brought here a while back when the chief signed it way back in March, I believe. And I know there was some delay in relation, but I know there's some further work, and I know Andrew has clarified that. I know in the letter, we were gonna ask the chief to sign, so now it's been changed for the CEO to sign? Okay. Yeah, because further be resolved that the CEO be authorized to sign on behalf of Six Nations. And that was in relation to the guarantee, right, of which CMHC, we're looking at CMHC for.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions to this? Elena?
Was this at the last BCom?
Yeah.
The one that I missed? Okay,
Yeah.
so what is council on the hook for here? I'm seeing 3 options.
Go ahead, Andrew, on explain.
NRCan is going to commit 8.8 million. We haven't gotten to the contribution agreement portion of that. This is just a letter for us. Initial cost, and that's one of the delays I was waiting for, was to find out what we are looking at for final cost. It's going to be around 17.5 million. NRCan withdrew their letter of support because we didn't pick an option by September 1st, but they have said they are holding our money. They're waiting for this letter that they want to give this project to us. CMHC has a forgivable loan for another $8.8 million, which is going to exceed our costs. So really, we're committing to the other 8.8 million, but we're just pending. It takes 90 days after I've submitted the CMHC application to get final approval from them.
Thanks.
So essentially, the bottom line, though, is Six Nations would not have to cover any cost.
If our CMHC application gets denied, I think we should walk away.
Any other questions? I think Dean read the motion, so if there's, Elena, you gonna move on the motion, or you got another question?
I can move on the motion just for the community's knowledge. What is this going to do for the community? I know that there's 109, I think it's 109 units.
We're looking at 109 units. A lot of them, they are townhouses, row houses all along the trail. They will be getting retrofitted panels that we'll be putting on the outside that increases their insulation, triple pane windows, and solar panels on the roof. So for our community, for housing, we pay the utilities for the seniors, so we'll realize that savings. But a number of our tenants who are not seniors, they will actually realize the utility bill savings. This is also going to create probably 10 to 15 jobs in the community where Grady is just waiting. When they see that council has committed, I'll let them know. They're going to go to their board of directors, and they're going to be creating a training program for workforce training, and then they're going to be doing some wage subsidies. So we're hoping to hire a local contractor. They'll probably be building the panels on that big warehouse on Chiefswood there, and then bringing them in and having a local contractor kind of as the foreman while these great students do the labor and learn the trade.
Okay, Elena, move on. A second to that resolution. Seconded by Hazel. All in favor? Motion's carried. I'm gonna waive second reading on that. Moved by Elena, seconded by Hazel. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, item number 7, which is the CRA access, and Jennifer will speak to that. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Good morning, Chief and Council. So a little bit of history on this. Back earlier this year, there was a council motion to grant me as the Chief Financial Officer with CRA access. What we didn't realize at the time was it was offline access, not online access, and there's a need to be able to access online on the CRA to have up-to-date information, and also to ensure during things like the Canada Post strike that we receive our documentation. So it was very challenging to get the access online. Several phone calls were made into the CRA, multiple hours on hold, trying to find the information. And essentially, when I got a hold of them, they said, well, somebody needs to authorize you online to have online access. So then became this treasure hunt to try to find out who had access. So they would not provide verbally a list of who had access to give access. So I started randomly just calling names that I thought might have access. So I ended up asking if Councillor Dale Bomberry had access. But when I asked them, I was asking because he was the former SAO. Because I assumed that it was very outdated, the information, because I couldn't view it. So they did confirm that it was Dale Bomberry. And then through that, connected with Dale and asked him to assist me. So he did. He came in and he started assisting me walking through. And while we were walking through doing that, realized that he actually had online access as a counselor, not as a member of the SAO. So after we were able to get through all of that, right, we were able to get through all of it. We were able to finally get me online access and be able to go in and see it. What I realized is that I'm granted with level 2 access online. So level 2 access online allows me to view account information and make requests. It doesn't allow me to change any information. And at first glance, I understand that it might not, you might wonder why I would need access to change things. Exactly what I was trying to go for is the reason that you need somebody administratively to be able to make changes. So this increasing my level to level 3 would allow me to add representatives and take away representatives. My suggestion actually is that you have somebody in addition to me to make those changes. So that way, in an event where you want to remove my access, you have online access to remove the access. But as it stands right now, it's limited to Councillor Dale Bomberry, just because of the way that it's been set up so far. So this motion is asking for council approval to have Dale again access online to give me level 3 access. So that way I would be facilitated in my role as chief financial officer to manage your online CRA account, meaning mostly for authorized representatives. Once I have that, I will be coming forward again with another motion later to be adding Tracy Brandt as the Chief Executive Officer, as your secondary administrator onto that, be my primary responsibility, but just to have the redundancy so that we don't lose online access again, to have that redundancy, but that will be a later motion.
And just to add, usually when it's me having that access, when we found out afterward that it wasn't because I was the SAO, but as a counselor, I think we're all listed on there. But because I had to go online and I had the online stuff, I was able to do that for her. So that's why it's here, and that's why when we first did it, I wanted her to bring it here to clarify with council on what we were doing in relation to the process and procedure of what needs to go on. And I think going forward, I guess that's where you're going to have that level 3 to add and change, so I wouldn't have to do it. So the motion is there in relation to granting the access. I know there's a few whereases about Jennifer, myself having that online access, but I'll just read that therefore it be resolved that the Six Nations Grand River 59 elected council authorized myself, Dale Bomberry, to grant CRA online level 3 access to Jennifer Court, Chief Financial Officer, that will allow modifications of authorized representatives, and further that Finance Administration develop a continuity plan for online access for CRA accounts for succession of staff and election of chief and council.
Just to add to a comment on that, through the process, my executive assistant, Becky McComber, was assisting and helping. And we said, okay, once we figure out how to exactly do this, we're going to document the process and we're going to put it in the chief financial officer role and responsibility and procedures so that it doesn't get lost again, because it was very much a guessing game to try to figure out what pieces need to come before this. So we're going to have procedural document in our files so that we don't run into this again in the future.
Okay, someone want to move on the resolution? Moved by Hazel, second by Elena, with a question?
In the resolution, can we add, I know that you're bringing another motion to add Tracy. I wonder if in the motion, because I don't know that there is a procedure, if it can be noted there that that is gonna be the process that, because once you have this authorization, you can, without a motion, you could just add and take away people because you have that authorization. But if we add it to the motion that that's the process, you come with a motion to add or
Remove.
remove.
Okay. So you want to add that in, that further, the chief financial officer will bring the process to add and remove to council? Or the actual action that which I think what she's referring to, if it actually happens, you bring it to council. And that's what you want to add in relation to that, right? So that process that, any further action to add or remove, that it be coming before council.
Yeah, just that it's documented. She's already going to do it,
Yeah.
but just so that it's there for
Okay.
the future.
You have that, Tia? Okay, so with the addition, Hazel move, Elena seconded. All in favor of the resolution? Okay, motion's carried. 7-2, waive second reading on that on that motion, moved by Hazel, seconded by Elena. All in favor? Okay, the motion is carried. Okay, item number 8, authority to incur expenses. I don't know if you wanna talk about that, Jennifer?
Yeah, I can. So currently, the chief executive officer and the chief financial officer have the authority in the financial management policy section 9.3, authority to incur expenses up to a limit of $300,000. With the council motions earlier this year with increasing the authority for housing loans up to $350,000, this has caused some delays in processing those loans in a timely basis because now it exceeds the CEO and the CFO signing authority to be able to authorize the loans and keep the tempo of getting the loans finalized. It's just created some issues with that. So this authority to incur expenses recommendation is for that amount to be increased to $350,000, and additionally, just to have the chief operating officer also added to the listing of people that can incur those expenses. So that way, for when a loan comes in, if Tracy and or I are on vacation and it requires dual signatures, that there would always be 2 of us available to sign for that. So that's what this recommendation is for.
Any questions, comments? Elena and then Hazel.
This has been here once before, I'm pretty sure. What was has anything changed? Or is it just coming back exactly as it was? Was there any
It had the
recommendations?
listing of the executive directors in there before. We've removed that and just asked for it to be chief executive officer and chief operating officer and chief financial officer. So in the discussions that we were having before, we were looking to have a secondary level between the 50,000 that directors have and the 350,000 that your chief executive, chief financial, and chief operating officer had. We had asked for 125,000, I believe it was, for the executive directors. We've removed that ask.
Okay. Do you remember when this was here last time? Was it a month ago?
I don't know. It was between when Tracy joined and now, which feels very short, but it could have been a couple of months ago, but I don't remember the exact date that we brought it forward. But it feels like it was a while ago.
Okay, thank you.
Hazel? I know the other reason why it came to was I know I raised a concern in relation to the housing loans in general. Because I know historically that's always been council authorizing the loans in the sense of guaranteeing the loan, as well as in relation to, as part of the application process of the 1 acre being assigned to council. And it had always been that way, and I didn't know, I guess with the signing authority having that authorization to do that, I was always under the understanding that it was always council that approved housing loans as it related to the guaranteeing of the loan, as well as the land set aside for council. So I know I questioned that, and I think that's where it kind of got delayed, and I don't know, Tracy was gonna do some investigation, and maybe she has, and she's got an answer.
So it's my understanding that there is a council motion to have the chief executive officer bind the nation. So as part of my responsibilities, that's part of the things that I do. And so that, you know, from a legal standpoint, which I have asked our legal to define that, So to bind a company means to make it legally responsible for fulfilling obligations or duties, typically through contracts or legal agreements. This term indicates that the company is required to adhere to the terms outlined in those agreements. Additionally, the authority to bind a company often lies with its officers or directors who can enter into contracts on behalf of the company. It is understood that they will be acting in the best faith and the best interest of the organization.
Okay, any other comments? I'm not voting, but I still think we should be approving those. So Hazel, you wanna move on that motion? Are you in conflict, Hazel, because they're adding the COO on there as a signing authority? Or no? Cause I know she'd be signing on behalf of the organization. Yeah. But just the fact that her daughters are there at the moment, that's all. Carrie, you got a question?
So for the housing loans, is the housing gonna make a recommendation? And it's gonna go to the CEO and the COO and the CFO? And they'll approve it, or you're gonna go regardless of his recommendation? Like cause normally their recommendation would come to council and we would approve it. So now any information that comes from housing, are you just gonna look at the information that he's recommending, or I'm just wondering about, so what if he doesn't, what if he just sends information to you? Like do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
I do know that the process changed probably about 3 years ago, under the former CEO, it was increased to the 300,000. And my understanding, because I wasn't here at the time, but I was here 3 years ago, so it must have been longer than that. It was 5 years ago, I want to say, that was changed. My understanding was that that was for gaining efficiency at the time. So there was a lot of, it was a want to reduce the amount of time that it took for processing the loans. And also it was to stop a lot of reoccurring transactions, such as a housing loan, coming to council to make those decisions and let council focus on other decisions. So the policy was set for the housing loans, and then they were looking at what kind of things are competing with executing basically the policies. And one of that was that the policy says you can have a housing loan for 300,000, but the signing authorities were under it. So this is why the ask is the same. So to answer your question, Councillor, I think it'd be following the same process as it has for the last several years by doing this. Now it has reverted back to having to come to council when a housing loan exceeds 300 to 350. But it would be to revert back to the process that we've been doing for the last, since I've been here, because I know that it has changed. It changed before I came here.
Follow up, Carrie?
Yeah. So if the housing director sends a recommendation and you as three will either approve it or deny it, or do you just rubber stamp it and send it on if he recommends it? Or is he just gonna send you the information and you will look through it and then you'll decide? Is that how it's gonna work?
Yes, we would look to make sure that they followed the housing policy, and assuming that they followed the housing policy, then it would be approved as it followed the policy that council's put forth.
Yes, so essentially, we wouldn't see them, Carrie, is what we're getting at, because they would have the authority to approve all those and they would move forward with all the paperwork, so it wouldn't be coming to our table. Elena, then Melba.
So the current amount is 300,000 for the signing authority. Is it possible for signing authority to remain at 300,000 except for housing, which can be 350?
Yes, we could change that. We could
Okay.
put that in the table.
If that's the purpose of it, I think, I don't know. Do we want to see all the housing loans? I don't, Dale's saying that that used to be the process. I haven't ever seen one, I think, as long as I've been here. So for our term, it has been taken care of administratively. I don't know that because we're nearing a limit, for mortgages, that maybe we do need to see them, or maybe we need reports periodically, for how close we are to that, because at the end of the day, it is this table that co-signs and has to manage all of that.
Melba?
Yes, Dale, you asked, is this a conflict of interest? How is this gonna work if this council declares as a conflict of interest with Koo and Hazel? Now, we, as older council, certainly have had many discussions in the past concerning conflict of interest. So I think we need to be clear on how this is gonna go forward, because there's much business, as we know, to do with Koo as Hazel's is sitting around this table. So how's that gonna work? For example, across the table, we have two brothers here. If you make a recommendation, is Carrie gonna say, or being declared a conflict of interest? Like, it needs to be straightened out. And I know we haven't had much discussion around since we've had a new CEO, and I'd like to hear from that, from the CEO as well as Koo. How are they feeling, or how is the business gonna go forward? We also had the secretariat here this morning. How's that gonna work? I have sisters that they've named. I have a niece that sat there this morning. When it comes to recommendations and final approval, how is that gonna be? Am I gonna be in conflict? So I'd like to hear some discussion around it to clarify it, so we won't go forward and being, confused um, or I guess, confused, about how we go forward. Thanks.
Yeah, I know in relation to conflict, I know when we make decisions in that, and, where we wouldn't be in conflict is if it's of a general application. So I know what we're doing now is we're granting authority, signing authority to 3 individuals. And my question was just based on Hazel and Deb and who they are. Nothing personal, no attack or anything, just the fact of process and procedure in relation. And I know Deb, she's a very astute person, so I don't see anything in that. It's just a question that I put forward in relation to how individuals would feel about wanting to declare that as a conflict. That's all. So I wasn't telling you to do it. I wasn't asking you to do it. I'm just wondering. That's what just my thought. So Deb, you have a comment? Tracy?
Yeah, I just wanted to clear that up because I think the conflict of interest really lies when there's some personal gain. Like, there is no personal gain in this situation. So it's not really a question. This is a matter of something that she requires in order to do her job, as outlined here. The same as Jennifer or myself. So this isn't something that's going to, she isn't going to sign a $350,000 check to herself. This isn't something that she's going to have any personal gain for. And I believe, Counselor, you've also mentioned that as well in other boards and things that you sit on, where, you have very close relatives, where you said, this is for the community. This is not for my personal gain. And so I see this is exactly the same thing. This is for the community. It's not for anybody's personal gain. And I further wanted to add about the whole legal binding thing. I understand that years and years and years past, everything had to come to council, everything had to be approved by them, and I understand that. I guess where I'm sitting is that you've recruited, looked for um, posted, hired for people to sit in these positions. You've asked for very specific criteria that was, I mean, not just anyone could meet. I guess for me, it's like, when do we earn the trust of council to do the jobs that we've been asked to do? And maybe I have no right to ask for that at this moment, but I do know that, over and over and over again, I have tried to ensure that council understands that I am always working in their best interest, that I'm always looking to mitigate the risk to this organization as well as to all of you individually. I view that as part of my job. And, I've had a number of years of experience as well as a number of years of education to be able to do this job. And it feels disheartening, I guess, if when it comes to, well, we better hold on to this because either it's you don't trust that we're going to do what's best, or you want to be involved in the administrative part of it, or like I'm not sure. If you wish to have reports, absolutely, that's something that can happen without question. Will we be looking and examining all of the housing loans? Absolutely. But I also want to say that if my housing director and my built environment director have said they've passed all the criteria, I want to be able to trust them that in their briefing note that they're being truthful in that, right? So at some point, I think that we need to start, trusting each other, trusting the process that we put together, because it makes it very disheartening for Deb and I to try and do our jobs when, our passion is this community. Our passion is for the people that are here. And we really only want what's best for them, right? And again, maybe I have no right to ask for that, but I believe that I come in qualified, genuine, experienced, with the best of intentions for this community. So, I'm hoping that you will allow us to do our jobs efficiently, give you reports so that you don't feel like, and it's always like, we're on the hook for this, we're on the hook for this. Yes, you are, but that's my responsibility to mitigate what you're on the hook for. And I can guarantee that if it's not appropriate to what it is that you should be on the hook for, I would never agree to it. So, I mean, if I need to say that publicly, then that's how I feel. And I mean no disrespect whatsoever, because I know that this has been a process for all of council to try and get used to follow. You've had all kinds of things changing. We have lots of, history and legacy in the room to draw on, which I do, and I appreciate. So I use it though to help us, move forward in a good way. That's what I have to say about that.
I mean, I wasn't questioning trust or anything, just process and procedure. And you're right, if things have changed in relation to the way council wants to operate business, then if council makes that decision, I don't need to. But I wasn't questioning you, Deb. I wasn't questioning, or Tracy, I wasn't questioning Deb. All I merely asked is just that fact. Now, personally, if it was me, then I would have just abstained from it, just if I had someone in Deb's position doing that. That's all, just for perception, that's all. But if Hazel wants to move on that motion, Hazel wants to move on that motion to grant a signing authority up to 350,000. And I know, Elena, you had your hand up earlier. Were you gonna second that?
I was gonna not propose the change because the
with
reason for it is the housing loan. So if the signing authority can stay at 300,000 for now, the noted change is required for the housing loan. So then it's 350 for the housing loans. And just my comment on the I don't think that it's a conflict of interest, Hazel, for
agree.
you to be involved in that. It would be, to me, it would be a conflict of interest, and I know Deb would probably recuse herself, just like Tracy and
Yeah.
Jennifer would when signing off on those. It would
Yeah.
be, it would be Deb to say,
Correct.
this is my brother, sister, son, whatever.
So Hazel, you comfortable with Elena's change? Signing authority for all stuff stay at 300,000, except for housing loans, which will be 350,000. Are you comfortable with that change?
Yes, I'm comfortable. However, I want to make a statement with regard to conflict of interest. I think I'm going to withdraw from moving this because already Tracy's used a word that it makes you feel uncomfortable. On all day Saturday, we were at the community trust, and there's so many of those people that come and do their presentations, and I'm deemed to be in conflict of interest. One was the Farmers Association because my brother's a farmer, and I'm absolutely not allowed to speak. There was a person needing clarification on that food,
Sustainability?
yeah, like the building and all
Yeah.
of that. And I asked the chair, sitting right beside him, I said, can I just clarify an example? Because this person couldn't understand what it was. And he, absolutely not. You know you're in conflict. You can't say a word. Like just, and that's been happening on the trust. And I know what that feels like when you feel like it's kicked out of you. I feel like I've been kicked in the teeth about conflict of interest ever since I became a counselor, over and over and over. And I remember when Bill was still the chief, that one time I told him, I says, you know what, Bill, I says, I'm afraid to die. I might be told I have a conflict of interest when I'm waiting to get waiting to get in. So just a little bit of humor to make
Yeah,
it feel
no.
better.
No, I wasn't accusing you of anything, Hazel. I was just a perception, that's all. So you gonna recuse from moving it now? Okay, anybody else wants to move? Carrie will move with the changes that Elena is proposing? All in favor? Well, Elena was the seconder, Carrie moved it. Second reading on that resolution? Moved by Carrie, second by Elena, all in favor? Motion's carried. Did you want to comment, Deb? Or Jennifer, sorry.
Yeah, I just want some clarification that we are adding, that we are both doing both things. We are adding chief operating officer to the limit of 300,000, and that all three of us also have a limit up to 350,000 for housing loans. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that was clarified. And also, just as a quick comment, I wanted to mention that I see this as the chief operating officer is being added to the financial management policy, not specifically Deborah Jonathan. That's one thing. So I think that that's one thing for the conflict. And also I wanted to ensure council that through the financial management policy and through our employment agreements, we're also bound by conflict of interest. And we also watchdog each other for conflict of interest. And we also self-declare conflict of interest as employees of the council.
Thank you. We have a second reading on that, correct? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Deb, go ahead.
Thanks, Dale. I just wanted to address your question about, the whole conflict of interest. I won't go into detail. I think Tracy summarized it the best. What I do want to say is that I've lived, I've grown, I've worked in this community. I know the perception that's out in the community when it comes to this. I just want to reassure you, like Jennifer said, I'm bound by my employment contract. I take these things very seriously because I know what that community perception is, and we don't rubber stamp anything. If anything, I'm going through things with a fine tooth comb because I know what my signature on documents mean and how important it is for me to be thorough, fair, and for it to be the correct process according to policy.
Thank you, and I know that, because I know I've sat in your seat, so I know what that's like, and I know what the scrutiny is like. So yeah, you always go that extra effort to make sure you're following council approved policies and process. So I know exactly what you mean. Thank you. Melba?
Yeah, just one a couple last words, yeah. I took advantage of that word that you mentioned, because I wanted to hear from the COO and CEO. So it's very clear now that it's personal gain and for community. And if it's that, then there is no conflict of interest. For example, I mentioned my sisters. I don't sit on a board.
Mm.
I'm not going to gain anything by them receiving money. So thank you very much for the clarification, ladies, and everybody else that we're on a same wavelength now. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I know it's in the policy. I know we created those policies that when it talks about the general application portions. Thank you. Item number 9, motion to adjourn to go in camera. Moved by Audrey, seconded by Dean. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried.